The CEO looked directly at the quiet cleaner, then smiled. "Security," he said loudly enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. "Take her access card. She's finished." Every employee stopped working. The young cleaner stood there without saying a word. She simply picked up her small bag, thanked the security guard, and quietly walked toward the exit. People whispered. Some laughed. Others pulled out their phones. To them, she was just another cleaner who had lost her job. But what nobody inside Vane Tower knew was that the woman walking away had spent the last 6 months uncovering a secret that could destroy the CEO's career before sunrise. By this time tomorrow, the man who proudly fired her would be the one carrying a cardboard box out of the building. If you enjoy powerful stories where the arrogant are humbled and the overlooked prove everyone wrong, subscribe and join our community. We share stories that remind us that integrity, courage, and character matter more than status. If you've ever been underestimated, leave a "truth always wins" in the comments. Now, let's go back to the morning it all began. Julian Vane lived his life at 30,000 feet. At 36 years old, he was the CEO of Vane Global Logistics. He lived in a penthouse that overlooked the city, a glass fortress where the air was filtered and the views were endless. Julian didn't drive, he was driven. He didn't cook, he was served. He didn't work in the way most people understood it. He moved numbers on a screen and signed papers that changed the lives of thousands of people he would never meet. Julian was a man of labels. His suits were Tom Ford. His shoes were Italian leather, handmade and costing $4,000 a pair. His car was a black Bentley Bentayga that smelled like expensive cigar smoke and old money. Julian believed that people were like assets. You either gained value or you were a liability. And liabilities were meant to be liquidated. To Julian, the cleaning staff at Vane Global weren't people. They were ghosts in blue uniforms. They were the background noise of his success. He walked past them every day for 3 years, and not once had he looked any of them in the eye. Then there was Aisha Bello. Aisha was the quietest cleaner on the night shift. She was 28 with dark, radiant skin and eyes that held a depth of wisdom Julian would never understand. Aisha lived in a small one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where the streetlights were often broken and the sirens never stopped. Aisha worked 16 hours a day. From 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. she was a dishwasher at a busy diner. From 4 p.m. to 11 p.m., she was the lead cleaner for the executive floor at Vane Global. And on the weekends she sewed traditional Nigerian lace dresses for the women in her community. Why did she work so hard? For her brother Toby. Toby was 19, a brilliant math student at Georgia Tech. When their parents died in a tragic accident shortly after they arrived in America, Aisha made a vow. She would be the bridge. It would be the sacrifice. She would work so Toby wouldn't have to. Aisha never complained. She never asked for a raise. She moved through the halls of Vane Global like a shadow, polishing the ego of a man she knew was hollow. She saw everything. She saw Julian's temper. She saw the way he spoke to his secretary like she was a dog. She saw the way he cheated on his business partners. Aisha knew Julian was a small man in a very expensive suit. But she didn't care. She had a goal. Toby's tuition was almost paid off. She had $45,000 saved in a shoebox under her bed, every penny a result of a missed meal, a double shift, or a night of no sleep. She was 3 months away from freedom. She was 3 months away from opening her own tailoring shop. But she didn't know that Julian Vane was having a very bad day. It was a Tuesday. It was raining, the kind of cold, gray Atlanta rain that makes the city feel like a tomb. Julian Vane had just lost a $200 million contract to a rival firm. He was humiliated. He was angry. And Julian didn't handle anger well. He needed someone to bleed. He needed to feel powerful again. Aisha was on the 42nd floor, the executive suite. She was vacuuming the thick, cream-colored wool rug in Julian's office. It was 10:45 p.m. He thought she was long. Julian burst into the office, his face a shade of purple that Aisha had never seen. He was on the phone screaming at someone. "I don't care about the logistics. I want their heads. I want them ruined." He slammed the phone down on his desk so hard that a glass of expensive scotch he had left earlier tipped over. The dark liquid pooled across his white marble desk and began to drip, one drop at a time, onto the cream-colored rug. Aisha didn't hesitate. It was her job. She dropped to her knees. He grabbed her cleaning cloth and a specialized solution. She needed to catch the stain before. Sit. She was focused. He was fast. She didn't even look up at him. "I am so sorry, sir," she whispered. "I will have this out in a moment." Julian stood over her, his chest heaving. He looked down at her, this woman on her knees, scrubbing his floor. In his twisted, angry mind, she was the perfect target. She was the one thing in the world he could still control. "What are you doing?" he hissed. Aisha looked up, startled. "The drink, sir. I'm just cleaning the rug." Julian kicked the cleaning bottle out of her hand. It skidded across the marble floor, the blue liquid spilling everywhere. "You're making it worse," he roared. "Look at you. You're incompetent. You're a peasant. Do you have any idea how much this rug costs? Costs more than you'll make in 5 years of your pathetic, miserable life." Aisha stood up slowly. She tucked her hands behind her back, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Sir, I have been cleaning this office for 3 years. I know how to treat this fabric. I was trying to save it." "You were trying to save it?" Julian laughed. A cold, jagged sound. "You're a janitor. You don't save things. You're the help. You're a ghost. And honestly, I'm tired of looking at you. You're a reminder of everything that is wrong with this company. Mediocrity. Stupidity." He walked to his desk and pressed the intercom. "Security, come to the 42nd. For now." "Sir." Aisha's voice trembled. "What are you doing?" "I'm cleaning," Julian said, a smirk forming on his face. "I'm taking out the trash." 2 security guards, men Aisha knew by name, men she had shared coffee with in the break room, walked in. They looked at the floor. They looked at Aisha's tear-filled eyes. They looked at Julian. "Mr. Vane," one of the guards, Marcus, asked softly. "Get her out," Julian commanded. "She's fired. Effective immediately. And don't let her go to the locker room. I don't want her stealing anything. Take her out the front door. Let everyone on the late shift see what happens when you're incompetent in my building." "Sir," Marcus hesitated. "It's raining. It's freezing outside. Let her at least get her coat." Julian stepped closer to Marcus. "Are you questioning me? Do you want to join her? Get her out." Aisha didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply looked at Julian. She looked at him with a pity that infuriated him more than any insult could. He walked out of the office between the 2 guards. As they reached the lobby, the janitorial staff, her friends, her family, were just beginning their shifts. They watched in horror as Aisha, their lead, was escorted out like a criminal. Julian stood on the mezzanine looking down, his hands in his pockets. "Let this be a lesson," he shouted so his voice echoed in the marble lobby. "This company, we only keep what is valuable. She is worth nothing." The doors opened. The cold rain hit Aisha like a physical blow. She didn't have her coat. She didn't have her purse. She had nothing but the uniform on her. But Julian watched her walk away into the darkness. He felt better. He felt powerful. He went back to his office, poured another drink, and began preparing for the board of directors meeting the next morning. He was going to demand a bonus for restructuring the company. Julian didn't know that the ghost he had just fired had a name he should have memorized. Julian didn't know that the board of directors had a secret. And Julian definitely didn't know that the quiet cleaner he had just humiliated was the only person who could save his life. Aisha walked. She didn't have her phone to call Toby. She didn't have her bus pass. She had 14 miles between the Vane Tower and her apartment in College Park. The rain was no longer just water. It was ice. It soaked through her thin blue polyester uniform. It turned her shoes into heavy, waterlogged weights. Julian Vane had called her a ghost. He had called her a peasant. He had told the world she was worth nothing. As she walked past the glittering storefronts of Buckhead, past the Gucci windows, past the sparkling jewelry displays of Tiffany and Company, Aisha felt the weight of those words. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass of a high-end boutique. She saw a woman shivering, dripping, and discarded. But then she thought of her mother's hands. She thought of the way her mother used to starch and iron her school uniforms in Nigeria, even when they lived in a shack with a tin roof. Her mother used to say, "Aisha, the mud may touch your feet, but never let it touch your soul. You're a queen in waiting." Like it. Aisha straightened her back. She stopped shivering. She wasn't a victim. She was a woman who had saved $45,000 through sheer force of will. She was a woman who had taught herself the logistics of a billion-dollar company just by watching the paperwork on the desk she cleaned. A black Mercedes Maybach pulled over to the curb. The window rolled down slowly. An older man, his hair white as snow, his face etched with the kind of lines that only come from a lifetime of real work, looked at her. This was Silas Vane, Julian's uncle, the founder of the company and the man who had retired 5 years ago. Julian thought Silas was in a nursing home in Switzerland. Julian was wrong. "Aisha?" Silas asked, his voice like gravel and velvet. "Is that you? Why are you out here in the storm without a coat?" Silas was the only person who had ever treated Aisha like a human being. During his final year at the company, he had stayed late many nights. He had seen Aisha cleaning. He had tasted the meat pies she brought from home. He had even helped her with Toby's scholarship applications. Aisha looked at Silas. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. "Mr. Vane, your nephew, decided that I was a liability. He liquidated me." Silas's eyes turned into flint. He opened the door. "Get in the car, Aisha. We have a board meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And I think it's time the board met the most valuable asset Vane Global ever had." While Aisha sat in Silas's warm library, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, Julian was celebrating. He was in his penthouse, pouring a 50-year-old Macallan scotch that cost $2,000 a bottle. He was looking at his reflection in his floor-to-ceiling windows. To Julian Vane, he toasted himself. The man who trims the fat. He spent the night preparing his PowerPoint presentation. Slide 1, increasing profit margins. Slide 2, efficiency through humiliation. Slide 3, eliminating the bottom tier. He was going to show the board that by firing low-value employees like Aisha, he was saving the company $1.2 million a year in benefits and wages. Julian went to bed on 1,000 thread-count Egyptian cotton sheets, dreaming of his bonus. He dreamed of a new yacht. He dreamed of the look on his rival's face. When he climbed the Forbes list, he didn't think about Aisha. He didn't think about the woman who was currently sitting with Silas Vane looking at the company's real ledger, the one Julian thought was hidden. "He's been skimming, Silas," Aisha said softly, pointing to a discrepancy in the logistics fuel costs. "He's been overcharging the overseas vendors and pocketing the difference in a shell company in the Caymans. I saw the invoices in his trash 3 weeks ago. I kept them." Silas looked at the quiet cleaner. He didn't see a janitor. He saw a forensic accountant. He saw a leader. He saw the future. "Aisha," Silas said, "tomorrow Julian wants a show. Let's give him a legendary one." The Vane Tower was buzzing. Word had spread about what Julian had done to Aisha the night before. The other cleaners worked in a heavy, fearful silence. The secretaries whispered at the water coolers. The atmosphere was toxic, thick with the smell of Julian's expensive cologne and the rot of his arrogance. Julian walked into the boardroom. He was wearing his best suit, a charcoal 3-piece with a silk tie the color of dried blood. He took his seat at the head of the table. The other board members, 6 men and 2 women, all in their 50s and 60s, sat in silence. "Good morning, everyone," Julian said, leaning back, his hands steepled. "Before we get into the quarterly reports, I want to talk about culture. Last night I personally oversaw the termination of a long-term liability cleaner who thought she was more important than she was. It's about setting a standard. We are a premier firm. We don't have room for ghosts." The room remained silent. "Julian," said Sarah, the head of the audit committee, "you fired Aisha Bello?" "I did," Julian smirked. "She was scrubbing a rug. He was in the way." "It was insignificant." Insignificant. Sarah repeated. She looked at the door. That's interesting. Because the majority shareholder of this company seems to disagree. Julian frowned. What majority shareholder? My uncle Silas owns those shares. And he's in the Alps. He hasn't voted in years. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open. In walked Silas Vane. Julian's face went pale, the color of curdled milk. But Silas wasn't the one Julian was looking at. Behind Silas walked a woman. She wasn't wearing a blue polyester uniform. She wasn't carrying a mop. She was wearing a custom-tailored gold lace dress, the kind she used to sew in the middle of the night. Her hair was swept back in a sophisticated bun. Her makeup was flawless, subtle, and regal. She walked with a grace that Julian's $4,000 cues could never buy. Julian stood up, his chair screeching against the floor. What is this? What is she doing here? Silas, this woman is a thief. I fired her last night. Silas didn't look at Julian. He sat down at the table. Aisha stood right beside him, her hand resting on a leather folder. Julian, Silas said, his voice echoing like thunder. You're right about one thing. This company is about value. But you have no idea what value actually looks like. You spent $40,000 on a rug, but you didn't realize the woman cleaning it was the only person keeping your secrets. And she's done keeping them. Aisha opened the folder. She didn't look at Julian with anger. She looked at him with the cold hard facts. Mr. Vane, Aisha said, her voice steady and clear. According to the invoices you discarded between January and March, you have embezzled $4.2 million from the Logistics Fuel Fund. You've been using the company's private jet for personal vacations to Ibiza and billing it as vendor outreach. And most importantly, she paused, letting the silence fill the room. You violated the core bylaws of Silas Vane's original charter. Section 4. Paragraph 12. The dignity of every employee from the mailroom to the boardroom is the foundation of our success. By humiliating a member of this staff in front of their peers, you triggered an automatic review of your character by the majority board. Julian laughed, but it was a desperate, high-pitched sound. This is a joke. You're taking the word of a janitor over your own CEO? Silas, be reasonable. Silas stood up. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a gold lapel pin, the symbol of the company founder. He walked over to Julian and, with one swift motion, unpinned the CEO badge from Julian's suit. Julian, Silas said, you aren't the CEO anymore. In fact, as of 5 minutes ago, the board has voted unanimously. You are being terminated for cause of severance. No bonus. And the legal team is already filing the embezzlement charges. Julian's knees buckled. He fell back into his chair, the same chair where he had toasted himself the night before. But who is going to run the company? Julian stammered. Silas looked at Aisha. He smiled, the first real smile Julian had seen in years. Aisha has been studying our logistics for 3 years while you were busy looking at your own reflection, Silas said. She knows our vendors. He knows our staff. She knows where every penny is. The board has appointed Aisha as the interim chief operations officer. She'll be overseeing the restructuring, starting with your office. Julian Vane sat on a park bench across from the Vane Tower. He was wearing the same charcoal suit, but it was wrinkled. He had spent the night in a cheap boat. His bank accounts were frozen. His Bentley had been repossessed. He watched as a black Mercedes Maybach pulled up to the entrance of the tower. Marcus, the security guard Julian had tried to bully, opened the door. Aisha stepped out. She looked up at the building. She didn't look like a ghost. She looked like the sun. As she walked through the lobby, the cleaning staff stopped. They didn't look away in fear. They stood tall. They cheered. They saw one of their own, the quiet one, the hardworking one, the one who saw them when no one else did, walking into the elevator that led to the top floor. Aisha reached the 42nd floor. She walked into the CEO's office. Julian's expensive scotch was still on the desk. The cream-colored rug still had a faint stain from the night before. Aisha didn't call for a cleaner. She picked up the cleaning bottle she had dropped the night before. He knelt down. She scrubbed the stain herself until it was gone. She didn't do it because she had to. She did it because she respected the work. She stood up, walked to the intercom and spoke to the entire building. Good morning, everyone. My name is Aisha Bello. To some of you I am a new face. To others I am the woman who emptied your trash. From today on we are changing how we measure value. We will no longer be a company of ghosts. We will be a company of people. If you work hard you will be seen. If you are humble, you will be raised. And if you are cruel, you will be replaced. Julian Vane ended up working as a junior clerk for a small firm in Savannah, Georgia. He was the man who had to get the coffee. He was the man who had to file the papers. And every morning when the cleaning crew came into his small, cramped office, Julian Vane stood up. He looked them in the eye. And he said, "Good morning. Thank you for your work." He finally learned the lesson Aisha had known all along. Your title is just a piece of paper. Your suit is just a piece of fabric. But your character? That is the only thing you take with you when the lights go out. And for Aisha? She opened her tailoring shop 3 months later, but she didn't leave Vane Global. She ran both. She became known as the tailor of logistics. She turned the company into the most profitable firm in the South, not by cutting people but by sewing them together. Toby graduated from Georgia Tech at the top of his class. At his graduation he didn't thank Asu. He thanked his sister. He looked at the woman in the gold dress and said, "She cleaned the floor so I could reach the stars." That is the lesson of this tale. Never mistake a person's silence for a lack of ambition. Never mistake their position for their potential. Because the person who cleans your floor today might just own the building tomorrow. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that your worth is not defined by your job title, then hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded of their value. And remember, in the grand story of life, the humble always rise and the proud always fall. This is our channel where the truth always gets the last word. Every tale has a lesson, and modernist Africa folktale never forget. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story of justice.